Good afternoon. For this cooking show, I'm going to demonstrate to you, show you how to make a tenderloin. Now, it's funny that we should mention tenderloins because I once got into a little spat with Julia Child about tenderloins. Julia Child. Right, well, she was the woman who really introduced French cooking to the United States, and for years she had the grandmother of all cooking shows. She was Meryl Streep made a movie about her a couple of years, Julia and Julie's, I think. But she was this 6'2" woman who spoke in a voice like this. And she was great because she taught Americans all about French cooking. She had a wonderful demeanor, too. For example, I remember a scene where she dropped a chicken on the floor. And, it was live television then, and she just picked that chicken up and was like, well, you wash it off a little, everything will be fine. So she's my inspiration. But back to the tenderloin. But, before we do, so I actually did have this conversation with her once. I'll just take a moment before. So it's about 1985, 86. I was young. I was in San Francisco working as a waiter during the day, going to school at night. And I had a job. It was probably, I'm going to say, the most prestigious restaurant in the city at the time, which featured a young chef from the Midwest, Bradley Ogden, who was bringing traditional American cuisine to California, melding it with sort of the Alice Waters, the New California, and creating what we were calling the New American Cuisine. So needless to say, any chef that was in town, from James Beard to Craig Claiborne, Jeremiah Tower, Jacques Pepin, and Julia Child, would inevitably come to the restaurant, often in the evening, but sometimes for lunch. And at that time, I was a lunch waiter. So on this day, Julia Child came in with her sister. And that alone is quite a sight because they're both like 6'2". And again, they talk like this. So they were seated at table 9, the VIP booth, my section. And you can imagine the chef and all the sous chefs in back and the maitre d' were all just like, just going nuts. So much pressure. They're all going crazy. And I was like, you know what? Relax. I got this. So I went to Julia Child and her sister, and I welcomed them to the restaurant. I provided them with a couple of cocktails. We had a little bit of back and forth about nothing, really. She was clearly in a great mood, and we'd established that rapport that is so important for a meal like this. And at one point, I was back in the kitchen, and Chef was all like, "What's she gonna have? What are they gonna order?" I'm like, "Chef, they're enjoying their drinks. I'll get you the order when I'm ready to get you the order." So I went back out and spoke to them a little. And Miss Child, I can't remember her sister's name. Are you ready to order lunch now? Oh, yes, certainly we'd like to. I don't remember what the sister ordered. Here's what Julia Child said to me. Young man, I'm in the mood for a steak today, and I don't see one on the menu. And of course, Miss Child, there isn't one on the menu. That's true, but I am quite sure that Brad has something on the dinner menu or the room service menu and would be really happy to make a steak for you. So give me one moment. I'll just check what he has. And just as I turned to leave, she said, "Oh, and don't come back and tell me that all you have is a tenderloin, because a tenderloin is not a steak." Oh, isn't that charming? So I go back to the kitchen, and as I walk into the kitchen, like I'm just swarmed by all these freaked out chefs and sous chefs. And I said, "Brad, this is funny. She'd like a steak, but there isn't one on the lunch menu. But what have you got? What have you got on dinner and room service?" He says, "Well, we've got this great tenderloin." You see where this is going? I said, "Brad, you're gonna laugh about this someday. She doesn't want a tenderloin." And then you can just see they're all like, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world." I said, "Calm down. This is what I do." So I went out and I talked to Miss Child, and I said, "Miss Child, you're going to get a kick out of this story, and someday we're both going to be telling this somewhere. Believe it or not, there is only a tenderloin on the dinner menu. Now, it's a delicious tenderloin," but she interrupts me. She says, "Young man, a tenderloin is not a steak. A steak has a bone in it." And then she went on. "You know what it is? I'll tell you what this is. This is California. Californians are afraid of food. They don't know how to make a steak." And of course, I laughed at Miss Child and said, "It's California. I just write from Arizona. I know exactly what you're talking about, these Californians." But here we are. So may I suggest the lamb chops? They're delicious. They have a bone in them. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And she said to me, "Yeah, well, yes, young man, that'll be fine. I'll have that." His sister ordered. I went back into the kitchen, ordered, everything worked out. And I knew in that moment that I'd be telling this story somewhere. And I came back out. They were fine. She enjoyed the lamb. So let me get back to my tenderloin here. Oh, speaking of lamb, have I told you about the time I waited on Lady Bird Johnson? Lyndon Johnson's widow at the time. It was in a private party, and Lady Bird Johnson, I served her lamb. I swear, a magic moment. She turns to me, puts her frail little Texan hand on my arm and says, "Young man, this lamb is wonderful." I'll never forget that day. But you know what? I digress. Let me get back to the tenderloin. And, it's fish. We'll have to do this another day. Sorry about that.